let me start this moving. So because people have to go, Betsy needs to leave at 2:45.
Yep.
Brendan, I know, needs to leave at 2:30. And the reason for this discussion really is we have a lot of work to do and a lot of organizing to get the work done that we need to do. And so it is the leadership of the council that will be looking forward to sort of guide that process through. We did a fantastic job with grant work and getting it all out, but now we really have to really look at our procedures. So for today at this meeting, one of the things I want to talk about is contracting, about a little bit of the urgency of contracting, where we are, some ways to move forward, in a conversation we actually had with the Attorney General's office. I want to be able to talk about staffing and about the executive director position, and the hiring of another full-time person to help with that. And I think that will be the highlight of the discussion for today, those two things about the contracts and about some timeline, some time frames, suggestions on that, where we are. And again, the conversation of, I want the executive committee to be able to make a recommendation to the full council this Thursday about the executive director position and hiring of at least one more full-time person. So that's where we are today. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that agenda.
Pat, number one, and this is for the audience. This is Gordon Smith, the State's Director of Opioid Response in Governor Mills' office. I'm not on the executive committee, even this interim executive committee, so we need to keep that in mind. Number two, in terms of responsiveness to your question, I would think we might today want to talk a little bit about what that agenda. I know you've already probably got a full agenda for Thursday, but maybe we could just at least review that
Mm-hmm,
for preparation purposes.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the reason Gordon is here is because he was an at-large member of the executive committee before at the last 2 years. So,
And I'll be very careful not to vote on anything that you're doing. Um, and so you should really consider me as an observer. Um, if I have something to offer to comment, I will simply raise my hand, and if you are willing to recognize me at that point. But we want to make sure that I don't end up getting caught up in this thing and just voting, because I'm not on your executive committee.
gotcha. Okay. All right. So, the meeting has
Grayson,
begun, and
Grayson,
I know that we do have some
Grayson has his hand
attendees.
up, Pat. Grayson has his hand up.
Oh, I say Grayson.
Hi, I just wanted to really quickly let you know that when you voted in the interim officers, Gordon did actually get voted in as an at-large member of the executive committee. So I think you're all set.
Oh,
We are all set,
I'm
Gordon.
so
You
disappointed
can
to
put
hear
your
that.
two cents in and you can vote.
Okay, take it all back. All right.
Thank you, Grayson, for keeping us on our toes. So again, I know that we have some people listening in today. I appreciate anyone who supports the council, and we will quickly go through this agenda. Um, we are so on Friday. Um, Gordon, myself, Brendan, and the Attorney General met to discuss our concerns. Well, first of all, we wanted to say we were grateful for the work of the Attorney General's office, particularly Brendan, in the work and moving forward with our contracts, but also wanted to share with them where we stood and sort of looking to find ways to improve the current system that we have, to improve efficiency in getting these contracts out and getting the funding where it needs to go. And I think that everyone was able to share their concerns and some productive ideas as we move forward. Um, and so we're going to have a discussion here because, again, we have the contracts from the money at last December that needs to go out, as well as, and Mary sent to you He sent you a list that Gordon nicely put together for us. I had it here somewhere. Put together to us of what we voted on in the grant round. And actually put it in, he grouped it for us in what he thought was appropriate grouping.
Pat,
And
I
when we
actually, sorry
go ahead.
to chime in, I shared it with you, Gordon, and Katrina so that we could present it. But I can share it now with the members individually in case they want to pull it up on their own screens.
Well, that makes me feel better because I didn't think I'd seen it, but I am quite used to missing things. So thank you.
So this list, when you look at it,
Aha.
not meant to say that this is the order that we're going to go in. This is looking at the grouping of, is it 45 or 47 programs that we voted on to fund.
There's 43, Pat, and actually there's 45 on here because in one place I tucked in two that we had tabled just as kind of a placeholder, those being the low barrier shelter ones, Preble Street and Hope House. So that's why if you look, there's a total of 45, but that includes the 43 that we did vote and those two that are placeholders.
So I don't know if you have questions about this list. I know you've just seen it and you need to absorb it, but it just gives you a real definition, a real view of the work that we have before us in developing contracts and getting this funding out. So questions?
Yeah, I'll give you just a little bit of context for it. As I looked at what I thought was in front of us, in addition to the maybe 10 or 11 contracts that we still have in various stages of process that we voted as early as 13 months ago and as late as November. I think that actually is the first thing we got to do is take care of those existing contracts. But then as I thought about, well, how are we possibly, if it's taken us 2 years to get to where we are, how are we possibly going to tackle 43 when we don't have any additional resources at this point? And so I did think that this, how we prioritize is going to be critical because we're not going to be able to do all these in January. And we'll have people start calling Mary wondering when we're going to start working on their contracts. And so this was a way for me to think about, well, which ones made sense that we could work on together, maybe have one template, eight recovery center projects, there's 6 recovery residences, there's the syringe harm reduction programs, the low barrier shelters, the criminal justice things, some treatment programs, obviously, and then there were a couple miscellaneous. So it was helpful to me, but I want you to realize too that there's other ways, there's other considerations that we're going to have to give thought to, whether it's Thursday or the subsequent meeting, because we probably can't start all these together at the same time. And another way to group them, obviously, would be by size. The largest contract's $1 million, except we've got 2 pending that are 1.1 million. But out of these 43, the biggest one is $1 million. The smallest one is like 20,000. Well, wouldn't it make sense to get the big money out first so that money can be working for the people it's intended to serve, and we'd work our way through back to the smaller ones. So again, this is just one council member's opinion on how we might look at this very daunting task of negotiating, then drafting, then getting signed and getting the money out the door for discrete different tasks with respect to 43 programs. And we have to do it differently, honestly, than we've done the previous 11.
Thank you, Gordon. Questions? Thoughts?
Uh,
Brendan?
I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand. I apologize so much for the new year. You, one question I've had is I haven't looked at the proposals that you all looked at in depth and voted on. But one question I have, and maybe I'll ask this of Ben or Gordon, who may have knowledge about this, but it, in the normal state process, when the state issues an RFP and various entities submit proposals, and then an award is made based on reviewing the proposals, what happens to the proposal at that point? Is it what I'm wondering is it possible for the council to take proposals as they were voted on um, for the purposes of the contract, or for example, does DHHS have experience with this? Is it necessary to convert or to work to convert the proposal into the deliverables and the reporting? My suspicion is that it is necessary to do that conversion work and negotiate with the successful bidder, but that's one. Because I have to leave in 15 minutes, I wanted to ask about that as a possibility.
Ben,
Um,
you should go first, Ben, and then I'll add my thoughts.
So can you can you just reiterate the question again?
Sure. It following an RFP award, when a proposal is accepted, does the department then do work to convert that proposal into its rider A, its deliverables, its budget, its reporting?
Yeah.
And I ask because I'm trying to anticipate, here the council has a bunch of successful proposals. Is the work now to convert those using subject matter experts or others with expertise in the work into deliverables, reporting and so on?
Yes. So when we go out to RFP and make an award or awards, to just say one award out to a provider, we would notify them obviously that they were the awarded recipient, and then work to negotiate a contract. Typically, that firstly, because our RFPs rarely include the dollar amount that is available, the bidder comes in with the proposal of how much they are seeking in funding. So if that is we often, or sometimes at least, need to negotiate over the total cost, and that's what sort of comes first, I think, and then we will negotiate the parameters of the contract are largely spelled out by the RFP already. They responded to the requirements in that, so that has the outline of that is already set. But then once we have the total value of the contract, we'll turn it into a contract and share it. Sometimes sometimes we work very closely with providers. Other times we'll just, if it's more standard and routine, we'll just work up the contracts that we typically have been using in prior years, and obviously the provider will see it along the way at some point. But for new contracts, we work with them fairly closely up front to arrive on rider A and, a scope of deliverables that is agreeable to both parties and then codify it. And then and then there's a whole series of things that needs to go through to get encumbered before it can be, effective.
I have very little to add to that, except to acknowledge how important it is what Ben just said. The state has dozens of people, contract managers, program managers, uh, who do this for hundreds of contracts. And each contract, I have given a lot of thought to, well, how does this particular application, how do we get this into a set of deliverables and a contract? And I'm glad that you mentioned, Brendan, the term uh, content experts, because it's just not anybody that can have that discussion with the potential grantee and say, how can we put this together? Because it's always in the context of something larger. So that's why I say we now understand better that there's different stages of the process, and they're all labor intensive. There's not many shortcuts available, and one of the most labor intensive is actually negotiating that first piece. Then drafting is more of a technical thing, but you need lawyers and contract people to do that. And that's why it's just we really have no one presently available to do this in high volume. There's only so many hours that Mary has available, and I kind of reluctantly over the holidays realized that neither Brendan nor Mary, this is not, they were never hired to primarily negotiate draft contracts. We need Mary to administer and lead the council. We need Brendan to be the counsel to the council, which is incredibly important. And he doesn't work full time for the council either. So I think this is why we've completed one contract today. And it's nobody's fault. But now that we know this and we've learned a lot, we simply have to do things differently and probably with a lot more resources, people resources, if we're going to complete these contracts.
And Gordon, for the record, additional money did go out the door today.
Excellent. The SSPs, I assume?
For several of them, yes.
Good, thank you. It's good to know.
It's one of the things we discovered in this process, and I think both Gordon, Brendan, and Ben said it well. There's contract language that's sort of standard, but the problem arises is putting the deliverables into those contracts because those are often unique. I mean, the SSPs, even those had to be negotiable as to what those deliverables would be. And so you can say you can have somewhat of a boilerplate contract, but within that contract, in that rider A, you have to have deliverables. And each one of these grants has a little uniqueness in it and exactly what is it that they're asking the people that we're awarding the money to. And we need to staff up in order to do this. And there's some recommendations as to how to do that, as well as the council stepping up and being able to use some of the expertise that sits on the council to get this next round of grants out into where we voted on for it to be. Questions, concerns?
Well, knowing that Brendan only has 7 minutes left, I want to talk a little bit later about communications because I think that's so critical that we also need to be more frequently communicating with our potential grantees so that they're not left guessing what is going on, when might I hear from these people, and so that they have a better understanding of the process. I think we all got some ideas of how we can accomplish that. It's not the hardest thing. But I do think it's an essential piece of it. But I'm really interested in, Brendan, what your ideas are about how we move forward faster so that we don't,
Sure.
we're going to lose you at 1:30.
Yeah. There's a couple of things. First of all, Ben, I think, if I recall correctly, started the conversation last summer about, for the council about the issue of, the post-award help. There's been talk of an RFP and so forth. And I think that would be helpful and I understand Mary's made a lot of progress on that. And, I think fleshing that out and getting that out into the community would be very significantly helpful. What I've worked up over the last, several months, year, is, a template that is largely based on the state contract. And many of the Recovery Council's grantees will recognize it as such. And, Grayson's been putting in some work to turn it into a form that we could turn over to the contractor, to the council, with sections that can be, to highlight which parts need to be filled in. And I think from my point of view, the thing that, just reflecting briefly on my experience working through the SSP contracts, we talk about that as a unitary thing, but it was really 10 contracts with 10 different providers. And I went into that with an approach, with a strategy to try to make it as uniform as possible, with the idea that would speed up and simplify the process. And I don't know that was successful. But I will say that, you may recall that the council, I came back to various committees and to the council numerous times to get clarification on, language or on the dollar amounts, as part of the process of negotiating that rider A. And I started with, what is the existing SSP contract with the state? I figured that would be a simple thing to just use that. And, we sent out in October to the 10 grantees a draft contract with that rider A. And you may recall that the reaction was not positive to that rider A. And Chastity, who, as you know, has expertise in the world of SSPs, was able to help out by rewriting and making adjustments to that rider A. And I think that was really critical, because I don't know that world. I don't know that subject. I relied on a historical document. But I could not have understood the concerns of the SSPs better than she did. And her assistant was incredibly helpful, and it moved it along much faster than I could have on my own. So I think, to cut to the chase, Gordon, I think, I look around the council and I see subject matter experts. And in the short term, I think, taking on the work of, converting the proposals into the deliverables is what I think would be if you can get down to a negotiated rider A, I think the rest of it goes, relatively quickly. We've done a lot of work internally in our office to improve communication with our finance division to better understand timing and process and other issues. And we've made mistakes along the way. I think we've addressed those or tried to. So I think if a rider A is arrived at, I can move it through the system. That doesn't necessarily add bodies to the work, but that at least is one. I think the council needs people who understand the substance of the council's work, to hammer out those provisions in the deliverables. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure if
Well,
maybe I
no,
took the long road there.
no, I mean, you've said something very important there, that it is very consistent with what that I've been thinking and talking to some of you about, is that I think, again, in the short term, actually the 15 people on the council can help immeasurably to move some of to move some of this, if they're able, if they have enough time in their schedules. I've offered I have quite a bit of time to help and would be happy to take on more of this, because it can't be done without content experts or people that understand the context of what we're trying to accomplish. So I appreciate that. I do think we're going to have to find a different way to do the work, then get the drafts to the Attorney General's office and you, and to just review it for final form, make sure everything's in there. The state terms and conditions are a different issue, and we can deal with that separately, because it's in some contracts it's not an issue at all. In others it's a big deal. Well, we can deal with that. But I think we now kind of understand each other, and I think that's going to help us a lot as we go forward.
And Gordon, one thing that's missing from your summary that I just want to flag is
Mhm.
at what point, if at all, the that negotiated contract then goes to the council itself for review, if any. So far we've had kind of a not perfect process of asking the finance committee to review contracts. I don't know that was the right move, but and maybe it should be program and grants, maybe it should be finance. I don't know, but it seems to me, I think it would be helpful to ask council members to help negotiate those contracts, but reflect on the fact that that gives individual council members significant control. And other council members may embrace that. But I just want to flag that the council should consider where in the process it falls.
Yeah, I agree that, and Mary is on top of this and is preparing a document that takes us through each step. And there's way more steps than we'd like, but of going through an award to contract. And that issue of will be on there. Obviously, there'll be a critical juncture at which we decide, okay, the language now is subject to final review by whom? Grants and Programs Committee, Finance Committee, Executive Committee, full council, and the council will decide that, and it doesn't necessarily, maybe contracts of over $1 million will be reviewed by the whole council, and less than that by grants and programs, but absolutely never by the single individual that's helping us, particularly on the short term, because this is all we've got available.
So when I listen to this, what I think, all of that makes sense, and we have to certainly look at a decision and be consistent as to how these contracts are approved. But as I listen to this, it seems like it certainly would not be within the realm of the Program and Grants Committee to start looking and reviewing these grants that we've approved, read them before the meeting, and come up with some deliverables that end up in that contract. And then you actually, if there's a budget in the contract, we certainly, the budget, not the whole contract, but the budget for those could go through finance. Finance doesn't, isn't going to, so you could divide those up. And again, if you need extra help because you have a contract that usually, again, I don't think it'll be any different. Last year, there was 10 people on the Program and Grants Committee. So you certainly, amongst those 10 people, would have some expertise that certainly could uh, review the grants quickly, look at those, and come up with the deliverables that could be added to those contracts. And I think that may be able to speed things up a little. Um, and I don't know if that makes sense to people. All right.
Pat, can I jump in here and just share a couple thoughts.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the committee's involvement in the contracting process. Knowing what I know now and how many moving parts there are, and trying to align on schedules where we can more confidently tell our grantees when they'll be receiving the funds, and knowing,
Mhm.
what steps need to be taken and when. Um, it may just add a logistical challenge if we share parts of the contract with one committee and then other parts of the contract with another. Um, Again, just thinking about scheduling and how challenging it can be already to have things ready to meet the cadence of our meeting schedule. It may work, but I just want to share that. Um, Another thing that I've realized is when we've made funding decisions, our votes are fairly general, and I think there's a lot we could do at the very beginning of this process to provide more information for myself, for Brendan, for the AG staff, to utilize, so that we have a better sense of what the deliverables look like. And so part of the checklist and process overview that I've been creating also includes, a list of information that I would encourage the council to include when we make those future funding decisions, so that we again can touch on those major parts of the contract without having to either make assumptions or wait until another meeting to receive clarification from the council. Um,
Mhm.
so I just want to mention that as all ways little ways in which we can streamline the process. But as Gordon mentioned, and as we've been talking about, we really do need to be thinking about both the short term and the long term solutions here. And the RFP um, is close to being ready to going out. Although I will say, in the past 3 weeks, the conversations that I've been in with the AG staff and with other folks from various state departments has really illuminated for me all the intricacies of this process and what type of vendor support would best support our work moving forward. Um, because something I've gathered that is, initially we were thinking about having Barry Dunn, come on in the interim and help with drafting the body of the contracts. Um, and from these discussions, we've learned that we have a template that's been created, and Barry Dunn doesn't really need to be drafting all of it from scratch. What we need for them to do is engage more in the contract negotiation piece, so that it's not just myself or Brendan trying to work with these upcoming 43 organizations to fill in those blanks.
Well, Pat, I can put my hand up here, but, no, I can't see how to do that either, I guess. There it is. Mary, you're right, of course, but there are I don't think there's any shortcuts. Even in the short term, even if Barry Dunn was willing to, put people on the ground to help us, so-called negotiate the contract from the application, they do not. They are not content experts. They are technical experts in what they do. And, you know, I think we'd have to spend so much time with them to educate them about the context of this particular single contract that I'd rather do it ourselves. Because if I'm going to have that conversation with them, I might as well have that conversation with and I think the 15 people on the council are quite excellent. And again, this is not a permanent solution. The permanent solutions would be largely, I think, things that way down the road, we're going to have to come to grips at, could we become more of an independent state agency like that? like Efficiency Maine or the Housing Authority, have our own lawyers, our own staff, our own bank account, send out our own checks. That could not be done without amending both the MOUs and the statute. That's a really heavy lift. But I do think that ultimately that's how we could completely control the process that now we don't control. And so we're kind of, I understand why the Attorney General's office is a party to our contract. They've tried to limit their role by saying right in the contract language itself, look, we're here because we have the money and we have to enforce, we have the enforcement authority, but this contract has been negotiated by the Maine Recovery Council, and our role is limited to X. So, but the fact that their signature, that the Attorney General's office signatures on that contract, and then that it has to go to DAF for the money to get out through this thing, it puts us into a in a box that under the best of circumstances takes quite a bit of time and multiple steps. And Mary has spent a lot of time over the holidays coming up with a manual that takes us through every single one of those steps. I don't think it's complete yet. I'm not throwing you under the bus here, Mary, but that's what we really do need, particularly as we think about the need for staff beyond and after Mary. So I think this is a really important discussion. I think we can merely get some of this work done, but I actually think we're gonna have to do a great deal of it ourselves.
Thank you. Bruce, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I like this idea of tapping into the expertise that's on the council. And I guess, maybe I'm way off base, but I picture a team of folks, whether it's 3 or 4 or so, maybe three just sounds good to me, odd number, um, of folks that, have the expertise with the contract, that have expertise in the particular field, and then, whatever that other budgetary person, however that needs to be set up, and tackling certain categories.
Mhm.
So we've got this expertise in the recovery residences. We have that group of people together. They're tackling those contracts, so on and so forth. I don't know exactly where it goes from there, but I just think that in that space, you could get some really good contracts and start that negotiation process, and maybe even complete the negotiation process. The other thing is, I just want to kind of bring up the fact that, yes, we had all of these wonderful projects up on the screen. We've got a bunch of stuff that was approved prior to that we need to take care of first. And until we do that, I mean, I know we can walk and chew gum at the same time, but I really think that we need to be taking care of what has already been
Yeah, we
approved
do.
more than a year ago.
Yeah, we do.
Um, Two other quick things. I'm saving it all for just one section for me to comment on this stuff. I'm really concerned about what Mary needs.
Yeah.
And we had this conversation, 2 months ago or so, and we were all, and Mary, you weren't in the executive session, but we were all just like, what are we gonna do to help Mary? And it's helping us too, right? So I really want to know if we're going to add folks to Mary's, you know, folks that are going to assist her that are paid from Mary, especially. What's going to what are going to be the most effective skill sets that are going to be needed that are going to help us with this process? Could those folks, some of those folks, be on these teams that we're going to have that are tackling the particular categories, and also at the same time that they can help Mary? Last thing I'm going to say is, Mary, I would be more than glad if the council's okay with this to help with the communications with folks that are going to be getting very impatient. And my former life was my job was to put out fires corporately. I am more than pleased to have those conversations. If I have any one skill set in this world, it's relationships. and I'd be more than glad to help out with that part. And I think it leads to this thing of this last 2 years, we've been just trying to figure out what we are and how we do things, right? And you either have boards of directors that are active in their organization, or they're folks that could just check off and go, yeah, that budget looks good. Yeah, we'll vote on this and like, hey, see you later. Or we have boards of directors that are involved. And I think that's what we're looking for at this moment. We need people on this council to be involved in these processes. We have a lot of expertise. I'm hoping that we can take advantage of it, and I'm hoping that the folks that are here, and especially you, Mary, take advantage of me, of my time, and certainly the time of the other folks on the council. Thanks.
Bruce, very well said, very good points. And I'll let Mary speak in a minute, but one of the things that I'm really hoping for today is that Mary and I had a conversation, was it earlier this week? I don't know, these mid-week holidays has me confused. But Mary and I had a great conversation about really, we keep talking about Mary needing help. We talked about it at that executive meeting. So there's a couple things that I'm looking for support for Mary with the executive committee is that Mary has a job description written about an executive director. That's what we said we wanted. What I would like is I would like this board to recommend that Mary step in as the executive director for the Maine Recovery Council and that we approve a newly written job description for a Maine recovery coordinator, which would be full-time to work with Mary. But we be able to approve those at the Thursday meeting. That way she can get out and advertise and we can start interviews up for that second position. So it's not going to be the be-all solution, but I think that if we can move in a somewhat quick and efficient manner, we can move Mary up in position to be executive director. She now has a full-time person to help her. And then we can coordinate things. There's so many things that throw in your head, like when you were talking, Bruce, about, meeting with all the grantees or whatever. We may want to consider grouping them and then meeting with, having a meeting with, a few council members and, 4 or 5 of the grouping grants to talk to them rather than try to meet one-on-one. We may try to group them to save time. There's lots of things that we can do, and Mary can coordinate that. But right now, I'm really looking for the conversation about not advertising for the executive position, but appointing Mary to that position and then advertising for a recovery coordinator.
If I can step in here and I can't find how to raise my hand, Pat, I would fully support that. And I would make that a motion. Number one, to appoint Mary to technically to ask her to take on the executive director responsibilities / job description. B, to advertise for a coordinator and present it to the council on Thursday. And I have to leave, which is why I'm asking so I can get it in the minutes.
Do I hear a second on that?
Gordon,
Gordon, if you're
you were muted, Gordon.
I'll second that for the purposes of discussion.
Thank you, Gordon.
all right. Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion?
Do we believe that the executive committee has the authority to do this? All we're doing, right, is really recommending that the council do this on Thursday. So
Yeah, that's right.
that shouldn't be a problem. So yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, it's our recommendation. And again, they may decide something different, but I'm just looking for support on this because again, if they all want to interview and then go out for advertising, then we will be another 30 days out getting an executive director. Then we'll be another 30 days out getting a coordinator. So you're talking another 60 to 90 days before we have at least 2 people doing this job. Bruce.
Ben had his hand up first, so I want to.
I got some other stuff to talk about, but I am supportive of that. Do we have to stop calling Mary Mary and go with like ED coin?
No, but can we please
Yes,
vote?
please.
Yeah, let's vote if there's no further discussion, Pat, so that Betsy can vote before she has to leave.
Can
Bruce, did you have further
I,
discussion?
yeah, discussion. I'm looking at this as we're going to vote on one other person. Are you sure one is going to be enough? It's like when they build 2-lane roads and then suddenly you need 3. I
We
mean, what
may, but we're going to
can we
start
leave?
with this.
Yeah, let's get this motion taken care of. I agree with you, Bruce. I would be more aggressive, but let's get this done while Betsy's here, and then we can talk more about staff.
Yeah. All right, if there's no other discussion, Grayson, will you take a vote?
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes,
Ben Mann,
Yes.
Bruce Naughton,
Yes.
Gordon Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you all.
All right, bye, Betsy.
Thanks,
And
Betsy
My
and Brendan.
apologies.
Brendan left too, so there we go.
All right, just
All
somebody
right.
let
So,
me know what time you adjourn the meeting.
okay, we will.
Thank you.
Bye, Betsy.
Bye-bye, Mary.
So, to Bruce, to answer your question, Mary and I had that conversation. We do know that we need help. Just the conversation we had in regards to contracting, getting funding out, and all of that. But at this point, this was if we can get at least one person on board, and we're hoping, cross your fingers, that by the February meeting, we're really pushing this. By the February meeting, we have a name to recommend for the second for Mary's position of recovery coordinator. That's our hope, but we're trying to get that moving. But you're absolutely right. Two people isn't going to do it. Not right now, anyways.
So
Yep.
I have two questions, Pat. One, when are we expecting to adjourn this call?
Well, I think they were planning on for about an hour.
Okay. Then my second is more a comment. Again, I said earlier that there's no, we really worked throughout the holidays to explore this. There's no easy, quick solutions to this. What we've just done, it will, under the best case scenario, it will still be 2 months where we're proceeding with Mary, me helping her, Brendan doing what he can. By no means a robust push to get these contracts done. And we have to do better. So I mean, maybe by Thursday we'll be able to come up with a stronger approach in terms of more staffing, Bruce. But it definitely, we're talking every day about, okay, what's the best way to get at this? But and we also need time for the finance committee to meet, it seems to me, because I don't know, like I would have been prepared today to say, okay, we need 3 people. We need a deputy to coordinate to report to the ED. We need a communications person that just focuses on the communications to the public, but also to our grantees. And then we need a person to help in some way with contracts. Maybe, coordinating. I don't know, but it doesn't seem. It seems to me that would be kind of filling out the team. So maybe by Thursday we could think about that, but we'd have to know how much money can we put into these contracted positions before people would really start looking at it and say,
Correct.
oh, they're spending all the money on people.
I mean,
Yeah.
that can be a finance committee meeting, but it's not going to come down to the finances we have in the bank. That is a political and optics call that you're making, or a
Right.
question that you have that. So that, I mean, we should talk about that at the full council. I think, I mean, as an aside, and this is not about me, but we need someone to run the budget for this, because I cannot continue running the budget and assembling what I get up from the OAG finance committee, the finance team every month, to determine how much we have to spend and what we are, out the
Yeah.
door and everything. That needs to be operationalized into existing capacity at the council level. I mean, we want the board to operate like like a real board, and we can't get there quite yet. So, I mean, I wish Brendan was still here for this, but like, I mean, just a couple of quick thoughts, if I may, just two observations off the top.
Please.
Like, the attractive part of the like serving on the Recovery Council is sort of over. We made the awards to, and we're going to have a bunch of in the weeds. It's going to be a slog to get this done, and it's
Mhm.
technical work, and it's not a particularly fun, but it's really important. And I like it because it's what I do in my day job and what I made my career out of. But it's also like I don't like it is. It's not what I don't think everyone or anyone maybe thought about when they agreed to serve on the council. So, and it's going to be really process oriented. It's going to go from like the Maine Recovery Council to a subcommittee, subcommittee to the provider, provider to Mary, Mary back to the subcommittee, back to the OAG, back to, it's really process and detail oriented. And that's where stuff just grinds to a halt. So we do need certainly more capacity. I'd be supportive of a third position as well to help organize this, but we need like that's why we need an executive director to sort of organize this all so that we can't just add capacity willy-nilly, because that's just going to possibly make things worse before they get better.
Correct. And that's what Mary and I had that conversation. Yeah.
Good. I think we're all there. We just need, and I think we have the parameters in place, and we know what we want and need. We just need to get there, and it takes time to do things here. Just an observation as well. I can follow up with Brendan on this too, but like, it wasn't, I was very, I think DHHS took like a couple, criticisms at every council meeting that we have because of state contracts and the bureaucracy and everything. But there's a reason why state contracts are set up the way that they are, and it is for control and to make sure that the significant funding that goes out is used in the appropriate and most meaningful and highest value way. So I just don't want to lose sight of that as we have, which is related to the third point of, I think we need we're going to get more internal capacity. We need to get this vendor on board. And the vendor, I think, we need like Barry Dunn or whomever it is to work with a specific council member with the provider to make sure that we're operationalizing it. Because if we ask a council member to raise their hand and say, "Oh, I have experience with recovery centers, I can actually write," and then we're like, "Okay, great, write these 8 contracts for us." They're going to be like, "What are you talking about? I don't know how to write a contract." But Barry Dunn or some consultant, that's what they are there for. They can help figure out how to do that. So it's not just a council member with the provider, or the provider being, the wardee, the recipient. We need that vendor to actually, like, the council member can talk and the vendor can actually turn it into a Rider A contract language, I think, right?
Correct.
That's what we need.
And that's sort of what Brenda was talking about, is that the legal part of the contracts are one thing. It's about the deliverables, and that's where the contact expert can take the grant and say, well, they said they'd do this, this, and this, put it here, and then you would put it and fit it into that Rider A.
Exactly. And the Rider, so I guess my question to try to push us along a little bit is, do we have enough information from the grant application to turn it into a set of deliverables, or do we need more information from the awardee to do that? Because if we need more information from the awardee, I don't want awardees writing their own contracts, but we can go out to all of them again with a form and say, look, you were awarded this. Give us some more information to help us write these contracts. And they could probably half of them will turn it around in a week. And we're going to have to think about our communications to them, because we're not going to get some of these contracts awarded for months. And we've all talked about that. But like, if we don't have enough information out of the grant award, we should go out to them soon and get the information so we can turn it into,
deliverables.
The
Exactly.
deliverables and the sub bullets under each deliverable, so that we can do that. Because all of these we did a very open-ended RFP. We said, like, what project do you want to do under these pillars, which is not the way that like the state typically contracts. We contract for a very specific service.
Right.
And then that specific service, sort of the Rider A writes itself a little bit, because we've already outlined exactly the services we're looking for. Ours was much broader. It was like, tell us what is needed in the state. which is why I think we're struggling a little bit. We talked about this months ago, but it's sort of like the inertia of everything going on is sort of, we just find ourselves where we are. But like, so I do think we could get more information from providers if we need to. So we're not waiting to ask them when we finally get around to their, 27 out of the 43rd or whatever. And I agree with Bruce. I think we all agree that we need to get those December 2023 awards out first.
Those
Like,
have
I
to
don't
go
even,
out first. That
yeah.
has to be the priority. Gordon and then Bruce. Thank you, Ben.
So with respect to what Bruce asked about the current contract, Mary is preparing a spreadsheet on those current contracts, because now that I'm willing to do more myself, I said, I don't know. I can't really help you until I know, okay, what is the status of each of these contracts? In a few cases, I think no work has been done, in which case I can step in and really help. That would be, for instance, the two planning contracts. Remember that we offered planning money to Franklin and Androscoggin when we took that money and shared it with Tessa's House and Milestone. That both organizations have sent in proposals, but we haven't even looked at those or talked about those. So I think, again, that step one, yeah, see where each of those, I think now that I know the SSP's contracts are done, I think there's about still eight or nine. You got Peter Alfond, you got Mayan, you got the CAP agencies there, you got the two planning contracts, still got Tessa's House, Milestone, probably missing one or two. So that is, we got to get that money out the door before we start on these 43. On the other hand, I think, Ben, you said something very important, and it goes hand in hand with what an idea I had, that we've got a good contact now for all 43. So Mary can contact with all 43. In addition to maybe sending a form, because a very important question to me as I did that potential prioritization was, well, which ones are ready to go? Which ones are shovel ready and just need our check versus others that say, oh, geez, we think we can do this starting in August. Well, that would help us prioritize which contracts go first. So I think one of the things on the form could be the timing of the project. But I also would love to send each and every one of them, a nice communication about an honest communication about where we are with our processes, when they might hear from us again, but also send them the 11 pages of state terms and contracts and say something polite like, these are the state, because the Attorney General's office is a party to our contracts and the state is holding our funds, that these state terms and contracts will normally be attached to each and every one of our contracts. Please, while we're working with you on the deliverables of your contract, please have your board and staff review these terms and conditions. Let us know if there's any problems with any of them, because we can sometimes make changes. So, that's a big problem that happened in the Alfond case, is that the Alfond Foundation had never seen those until the very end of the process. And then along with what they expected in the deliverables was this 11 pages of state terms and conditions that are ridiculously in favor of the state, understood, right? But in this case, we asked the Alfond Foundation to do this for us. We asked them to do this as a favor to us. Could they help us deliver the funds to 28 youth development organizations so that we weren't writing contracts for $20,000 or $30,000 to 28 different organizations? So I use that as an example, Ben, actually, because each one of these 52 things are different. They really are. And that's why content experts, I like Bruce's idea, by the way, and I'll shut up in a minute, of three people. That's not a bad idea. While I could do something like Tessa's House myself and make sure that we get it to a committee, in most instances, a Barry Dunn person, one of our board members, maybe pulling in an additional content expert, that would be a great idea. And I think in the short term, we're going to have to do the work ourselves. So let's think about that.
Thank you, Gordon. Bruce?
All right, I'm going to be super quick. I thank you, Gordon, for that because I was going to thank Ben for putting a little meat on the bones of the idea of the teams.
Yeah.
And I think that's a workable way to do these things. And then the other thing, and I also like what Ben was saying about kind of talking to the vendors about their deliverables because at least with the contracts that we've had and then collaborative contracts that we've had, we're always thinking about what data we want to collect. And I think as you're going in and you're thinking about these projects, I think most of these folks are going to have a really clear idea of kind of the data points that they want to collect information about. And they're also going to have targeted goals for how many folks are going to serve and so on. So I think that's a really good shortcut to starting that negotiation process of the deliverables.
Thank you, Bruce. I like that plan a lot. And I think we can, with Mary's help, move that forward. Do you have a question for you, Ben? Would you, there are CPAs, accountants, who take on for contracted money projects, and they specialize. I can think of a few that specialize in nonprofits that specialize in mental health and substance abuse thing. Do you think it would be beneficial to have an accountant on some sort of contract with us to develop budgets and to look at things for us? Or do you think that wouldn't work?
I think it's an interesting idea. I wouldn't recommend that. We don't need an accountant. We need a budget person.
Yeah.
There's no accounting to do. We need to develop a budget and track expenses against actuals. I mean, it sounds like maybe you're saying that's accounting, which it's really like budgeting. It's like using numbers to tell a story, basically, not like
Yeah.
we're not working in a general ledger here. And I think we would be paying a lot of money that we would not be getting value for if we hired Ernst and Young or something to
Okay.
do that. But
Because I
I
just,
think someone
again,
who's skilled in a PowerPoint and in Excel and has some experience with that, I think would be sufficient.
okay.
Pat, I need to ask another question. I think there's a couple other things that we wanted to look at that agenda, and a couple other things came to mind, but I really need to do a time check. I moved to 3 o'clock, and I just said, just work without me, and I'll join you when I can. But I've got more time, but I need to test your patience of the seven of you to see whether we could safely do another 10 or 15 minutes. I don't know if Ben is late for an obligation, for instance.
I
Onward.
canceled my 3 o'clock, but I cannot stay till 4. I could stay for another 10 minutes.
Okay,
Yeah, I can stay.
helpful. Pat, you're okay with that?
Yeah, and Katrina, the person who's in charge of our Zoom, I'm fine with it. Katrina, the person who's in charge of the Zoom, is that okay with you?
Katrina is gone. Actually, she left
Okay.
early, so it's me.
So
And I'm good.
Grayson, can you do that?
Yes.
Okay, and Mary?
Yes, yeah. Our meeting's scheduled till 4, technically. So
All
from a
right, so
logistics standpoint, we can be here.
We'll try to finish up here in 10 minutes. I wanted to make one general comment and then raise an issue for Thursday. This has been a really good meeting, I think. One other thing that really has transpired over the last month or so as we've really gotten into this, and as I really started getting people's attention when I pointed out that we'd only really successfully completed one contract and had 53 in front of us at least. And I think one thing that's really helped me in my thinking about how we move this along is that we were so dependent upon Brendan, and he had done the templates, and we had really put on to him, really, I think the assumption that he and Mary would just do these contracts. And now that we really understand it's neither of their roles to primarily do that, it has allowed me to say, okay, we can do these ourselves and just have the Attorney General's office review our contracts, only because they're signing them, for one thing, and because they also, Summer has a good working knowledge of what they're going to need over at DAF's when they go over there. And some of the bigger ones, I assume Ben will have to go to the SPRC as well. So it's really allowed me to think differently about my relationship with Brendan, that it's okay for us to take this on and that we're not offending anyone and that these are our contracts. We're the ones that are responsible for the fact, ultimately, that we've only completed one in 2 years, and it's up to us to fix it. And yeah, we have to work in the context of a complicated, bureaucracy, but we can do that. But it's really helped me in my thinking that, hey, we can draft all the contracts we want and send them over to the Attorney General's office. And if they've got issues with them, then they can send them back to us. But I think this is what we're going to have to do. And I've tried this in at least one case, and I arguably think it's going to work. On Thursday, I'm concerned that there needs to be time on that agenda to respond to, at least in one case, one of the motions we made to table a project, I think, and that's the low barrier shelters. That's one that we're getting some of the most pressure on, and that can make the strongest case that, hey, look, we were in tier one, we scored high, we were told to submit individual applications, and you funded two of the four, and then looked at us and said, well, we didn't fund the other two because we tabled it because we really didn't understand how they were going to work together. They're right about that. And I think we have to acknowledge, at least we got to talk about that Thursday, at least about, and that's where you come in, Ben. And again, I don't know whether there's any more money we can spend, and even committing the money, given that it's going to take months to get the money out the door. The low barrier shelters, the state provided a lot of money, but they apparently were counting on us for a piece. And what we did was inherently unequal. We funded two and left the other four, including the lead one, high and dry. So I guess my simple question is, do we have time on that Thursday agenda that we can discuss that somewhat?
Gordon, I can tell you that that's part of my report,
Okay.
yeah, next steps on the grant application will be included. So in addition to the low barrier shelters, as I've been going through evaluations and reviewing the grants, there are a handful of applications where there's pretty significant variance in the evaluation scores, enough so that I'd like the council to at least take a second look at those. And I think it's the very least, we could do to support these applicants, especially given the time and effort and energy that went into these grants. So I will have a spreadsheet with those applications with the low barrier shelters included, because those have been on the agenda since November. And my recommendation will be that we put those discussions, well, more detailed discussions on hold until the Program and Grants Committee meets, which I think we'll probably talk about on Thursday as well. And I hope that that's by the end of the month. But I think the committee will be able to really dig into what's needed. And if there are additional questions that need to be answered, that's certainly something that I can work with the organizations to provide the council by February. I will say I strongly urge we do not do any sort of second application or require much in the way of additional information. But I do think there's a larger discussion we need to have around how to support these applicants beyond just funding, potentially.
I appreciate that. I think the Grants and Programs Committee, we got to get a meeting scheduled, but I do think that makes sense. I saw the one that came in today, your communication from Save a Life. They copied me on it. I realize, and Ben really knows this acutely too, that it's a bit of a black hole that you're going into. We look at one, it's very hard. Then I met with Mike Freisinger this morning, who does a recovery center work for the state, and we talked about this. I said, if we look at one, then how do you not look at Hills Recovery Center? Another one we turned down, very strong application. I mean, so I agree with you, but I'm also very nervous. I mean, I'm even very nervous to bring up the low barrier shelters, but again, I don't know how to ignore that, because I think they're right in what they're saying, that they've been treated actually quite unfairly, because we told them one thing and then we did another. But when you start letting people communicate with you and say, hey, please take a second look at my scoring because we think we got screwed, boy, that it's just dangerous. Ben, can you comment on that before we recognize Bruce?
I mean, remind me what the situation with the low barrier shelters is?
Well, the low barrier shelters. So you remember the state gave them quite a bit of money in the state budget last time because they were going to close. I mean, they provide a very essential service. There are about 4 or 5. There's Preble Street. Preble Street now takes over Hope House in Bangor on February 1st, and they have 2 low barrier shelters. So Preble Street will have 3. Mid Maine in Waterville has 1, and then Milestone has its low barrier shelter. So there's really about 5. We funded Milestone and Waterville and tabled Preble Street and Hope House after they had been told a year ago, or more, well, months ago, that we preferred separate applications rather than having them put in for one large amount of money, which would have been well over $1 million. And that's what we told the recovery centers too. The recovery centers were going to put in one big thing through PRCC. And I said, please don't do that because the needs are different. And we'd really like to see applications from the individual recovery centers for what their needs are. I still support what we told them. We basically told the low barrier shelters the same thing. Oh, don't put in one omnibus application, put in separate ones. And but then when they did that and they were all identical, we then tabled it partly on the basis that we didn't understand how they'd be working together. You see the problem? We really told them, thanks for working together, but we want you to put in separate applications. They put in separate applications. They're identical. Then we fund 2 out of 4 and say, we don't quite understand how you're working together. It's just, we did the best we could, but I just think we have to revisit that and see how we can, if there's a better way that we can do that for them.
Yeah.
That's the
Thanks.
problem in that case. In the other case, there was some recovery centers who were very, very disappointed. Belfast is one, Norway's another, Lincoln's another, and they all had decent applications for the most part. And some got funded and some didn't. And so the ones that didn't are really pushing back. I don't think we can fix all that. But if Mary has really found a logical grounds for revisiting one or more of the applications, I think that's a little different.
Well, can I just jump in? And sorry, Bruce, I don't mean to cut you off, but Gordon, I hear you completely. And I do think it's a very slippery slope that we could go down. And really all I want to advocate for is just, if we're going to revisit any, let's have a very open and transparent process. And again, not have it be specific even to council funding. In early December, I met with the SUD funders group, and there's some folks who are really interested in learning more about these grant applications and potentially partnering with the council to provide their own support. And so I think it's a far more expansive discussion than just funding somebody again, because I agree. I don't think that's the precedent we should set by any standard.
Agreed. And I was with you at that meeting, and I agree. That really gets involved with wearing my other hat, saying that, no, you've got a good center there. Let's put our heads together about how we can support it, what other resources we have, private philanthropy, the state contracts, the recovery council, and those are all very much appreciated conversations from those partners. I agree.
Bruce?
This is really minor, but I seem to remember we're mentioning things being tabled. I thought we tabled Maine General's application as well. and we're going to ask them some questions and whatever. And I don't know if that ever went anywhere.
We did. We did table their application for a syringe program. And that was because they have two programs, Waterville, Augusta. They were going to expand around Waterville, and we had put in $1 million to Somerset County for Kennebec Behavioral Health to do a syringe program in Somerset County. So and we couldn't fund everything. So that's really why is that we really we tabled it because we somewhat questioned whether there was a need if we were going to do a robust program in Somerset County, whether Waterville really needed what they were proposing to do, because they already have a program there. So that's why. I talk to them all the time. I have not had particularly pushback on that, to tell you the truth. But in a way, we tabled all the applications, in tier 1 through 4, and said, we're not turning down anybody. We're authorizing grants to these following 43 projects, and we're going to keep all the others under consideration and table them all. And as we get further funding, not put out a further RFP likely, but we'll go back to these existing applications. And I think that probably is our intent.
So here's the practical question. I get that we open up these discussions. I get that we look at the process. I'm turning to Ben. Do we have money to even consider opening these up and funding them? That's the question. We promised this money, we voted on this money. Then we have money that we have to save for the prevention grants that are hopefully going to go out. The bottom line is, if we're going to fund the low barrier shelters or look at Save a Life or some of the other programs, do we even have the money to do that?
I don't have the budget up in front of me right now, but I'll just speak generally. I think we allocated more money than we budgeted in the first place. We already increased that, and that will simply in a year or two, probably 2 to 3, because we haven't gotten, these are all 2-year contracts out. So, we don't have to make any decisions after these contracts are coming to an end. We will just have far fewer contracts that we could re-up. And there are truly 2 years of funding. So that is, instead of providers complaining to us that they don't understand their status in the funding line, they're going to be coming to us to say they have to lay staff off because they do not have the funding to continue. Now, that's a future problem. So maybe but that's like, we have millions of dollars in our account, but if we want continuity and sustainability over time to use these funds, we need to marshal the funds and save them so that we can continue funding the contracts that we have the distributions we just made. Otherwise, they're going to stand up things and hire people and do things, and then we're going to end the contracts. So it's just a product of how front-loaded the funding is.
Thank you.
Two things. There'll be more settlements down the road. Governor and I talked about that on Thursday. Brenda and I have talked about it. We don't like to talk about that because, until they're received, they're not in the till. But there will be further settlements. We don't have any Purdue Pharma money, but if you went to the public, 3/4 of the public thinks that we're funded with Purdue Pharma money. We don't have any Purdue Pharma money, money yet, but we will have some. So that's one thing. The other thing to think about, I bet this will happen because it's happened with our previous contracts already, that because of the length of time it does take from application to, scoring to then awarding, then to negotiating that contract, we may find that some of these 43 projects are today not viable. We may find when we send out that form, has anything changed? One question should be, has anything changed, with respect to your organization and your plans since you submitted the application? A lot of these things are $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 I know one of them, for instance, I think it will go, but I scored it and I said, I don't, I cut back, I recommended that it be less money and we granted it less money. And I said, I like this organization. I love what they're doing. I don't like what they're using this money for. And that happened to be the direct access one where they wanted to buy a building to put their call center in when, the best call centers in the
That's
world,
it.
people are doing their calls at home. So I mean, I just think there's a lot, you know, I don't know that anybody except Mary has really looked at as many applications as I have. And there's not a one that can go from easily from application to deliverables. And we don't have that advantage that the state had by having a narrow RFP that said, here's the 10 things we want you to do. And then we put those 10 things. It's our things were more general, as we've said on this call. Our organizations go from small to large. So anyway, I just think that there probably is within, how much money did we vote in November? I couldn't remember. Did we get it up to, was it
It was 13.9 million.
$14 million? Okay. Honestly, I just think, don't you see that months from now, in some cases, we will be amending a motion to change a program that we had supported at X amount, and we'll be amending it to do something different. We did that with Franklin and Androscoggin County because by the time that we got done, we got ready to potentially to give them money. It turned out we didn't need detox beds in those two counties, or we had enough questions about that even the county people said, no, we're not ready to do this. So anyway, just something to think about is that there will be things that change all the time. And because of the long length of time it takes to do this work and the needs change so quickly, that a lot of these things are going to change by the time we get to a contract.
Well, and there's two things that come to mind. One is because I haven't read them all. How many were continuing program and how many of them were one-time deals? And so we need to know that because that wouldn't affect what Ben was concerned with the ongoingness of it and whatever. If it was a one-time, we want to buy a recovery residence. I don't know how many of these are one-time and ongoing. The other piece, and I know that it is not the be-all to the recovery centers. I know that, but they may need money now, but we do know that isn't it July, recovery centers will be receiving the monies from that bill that went through last year. Is that correct?
That is dependent upon an RFP
Uh,
that I had hoped to see in October or November. That's not yet been published.
okay.
So,
All right.
yes, I mean, it
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
mean to throw anybody under the bus. Honestly, I'm just saying we need to see that RFP out the door pretty quickly if
Yeah.
people are really going to have money by July 1st. That's all I'm saying. But
Okay.
yes, that they'll be competing with for some state money and from some cannabis tax money. I'm told that whole package could be $4 or $5 million. I think actually slightly over $5 million, but that will still not fund 24 recovery
No.
centers
Oh,
in
oh, oh,
any
absolutely
robust
not.
way. Probably,
Correct.
probably will be able to do half of them in a pretty healthy way, and the others are going to have to scrimp and scrape as best we can.
Yeah. All right. But only win megabucks. Okay. All right. So I think we have a plan to help move somewhat of a plan, or at least the executive committee, which could change a little um, come Thursday. But I think we all in agreement that one is our priority this year really needs to be about moving these contracts forward and getting the money where it needs to be. Particularly, we need to start with what we promised a year ago. Those need to be the absolute priority and getting those out and done. I think we can further the conversation with the programming committee is to develop a team to work with the contracts. I like that process of a team. We talked about Mary's going to continue to work on the RFP process to get us some support groups, some needed support with that end of it. We're gonna do some work. Finance will do some work into getting a budget developed for the committee, so we do know how much money we have to spend on staff and admin. Um, and he doesn't have to do that alone. The finance committee, I think, can get together and help him, develop that budget. So we do know we have so much money to spend on some expert help to get in here. Even again, it may be temporary help to get us through this hurdle of getting these contracts out. Um, so I think that's been the conversation. I think the important part is that we're in agreement, um, and they're going to work together with it. Um, other thoughts?
I have one more thing to offer on the 3-member team thing. We've had a few state people had volunteered to help us when our contracts are on things that they've done contracts for. For
Yeah.
instance, Karina and Stacy Chandler. I love the idea. You could see for our some of our residential treatment programs, a
Mhm.
team of a Barry Dunn person, Karina O'Leary, and and a council member,
Yep.
myself and somebody else. I mean, the difficulty there, honestly, is that we don't want all the state stuff in our country. We don't want our countries to look exactly like all the state stuff.
Mhm.
We'd like to have it a little gentler, a little more streamlined. And so the state people, we really need them. We really
Okay.
need their help to do this. On the other hand, we don't need them. We don't need to have them just bring in an entire state contract, and that's our contract. Yeah, but I thought it was very generous of them. They're very busy, and they know we need help, and they have volunteered, and their supervisors have agreed that they can help us if we find the need. So just something to know about. And I'm glad Ben heard some of that.
Yeah, and I do believe, if I use the example of Piscataquis County, they were handed a contract and they really didn't understand it. And Mary asked, because I've negotiated peer recovery contracts before, if I could sit in on the meeting because they just had questions. What does this mean? But once they were explained the simplicity that it wasn't as complicated as they were looking at, um, they were fine with it because a lot of times the legal language of it, they're like, I got a what? We can't do that. And again, it was just me on the phone with Mary with Piscataquis County Recovery Center up there and just walking through that contract. And that point, they signed it. They said, okay, we just need to understand it. So I think the more that the council members can help with their expertise and moving it forward, I think it's helpful. And I think the starting point may be programs and grants, with that, and helping organize those teams. But the other question at some point in time I have to figure out. I serve on a lot of boards. I don't review contracts.
Right.
I don't review every contract. If it's usually the CEO or the executive director that reviews the contracts. And I mean, again, is Brendan really saying that everybody on the council has to review 45 contracts?
No, no,
That's
he's not
just
saying that.
insane.
No, he's not saying that at all,
Oh,
really.
okay. That's what
He
I thought.
he's
Yeah.
not saying that. He's saying that we need to know as part of the process what body is signing off before it goes to the AG's
Okay.
office. Is it grants and programs? Is
Okay.
it now? I never intended that, despite now us being actively involved in the contract, that one council member, including myself, would actually sign off on that contract. No, it's got to, but I think programs and grants is the place,
Yeah.
except the timing might be that maybe on a contract that's all ready to go and program and grants doesn't have a meeting for 3 weeks. Maybe we do it in the finance committee. So
Yeah.
it could be any of those three committees. I don't see why any full contract would get to the Recovery Council at all, to tell you the truth. So I think that's what is expected there.
Yeah. Okay.
And Pat, I think we're in a pretty different position with the grants than we were with the December allocations because we didn't ask for any information from them.
Yeah.
And so we received all of that, after the award had been made, but we now have a lot more information and we have budgets
Correct.
and we have all of that. I will also note that I've already discussed with Brendan sitting down with a meeting Friday to go over the state's terms and conditions, that sort of standard language that
Mhm.
Gordon was mentioning, to make sure that I have a very clear understanding of it and can mark up a copy essentially to provide an explanation as to why, and then share that with the council so that you all can have more insight as we, break off into groups and engage in those conversations.
We we know from the work that Mary and I did with DAFs in the AG's office that we're not required to have every state term and condition in our contract. We know
Yeah, we're not.
that we have some discretion on what's included, that the attorney general's office, because they're a part of the contract, they would have some control over that as well. But they don't have to have all the state standard terms and contracts in their contract. And so everyone can be a little different. Some people won't object to all of them, and that's great because they have to take contracts like Milestone. Others, but I think again, a key is to we know what these terms and conditions are. Let's get them out to them so that people can
Yeah.
be thinking about them. I also think something that you've said about helping Recovery Wellness Institute up in Sangerville brought this to mind. Every single every single contract and grantee is different.
Mhm.
We will not. Now we fully funded the opening of a new center in Skowhegan because there was none in it was a strong proposal from
Right.
Kennebec Behavioral Health, and they have no recovery center in Saginaw County. So I mean in Somerset County. So we funded that. They already they already have a center. They have a building. They no state contract. That contract will be relatively easy, as opposed to say, and it's a big behavioral health organization. They have lawyers. They have grant writers,
Correct.
as opposed to say working with Ryan Page, wonderful human being, works out of his kitchen probably, does really important work, gets people into recovery. Wouldn't you agree, Bruce? Yeah.
He does.
But he doesn't have lawyers. He doesn't have CPAs. He doesn't have chief financial officers. He's going to need a lot of help
Mhm.
before we give him $500,000. It's just like I say, every single situation is different. And I think it's a wonderful idea that we've come up with to have a team of people
Mhm.
to help them, to
Yep.
help them, and not just hand them a contract, which we couldn't do anyway. We cannot possibly draft these deliverables for these 43 contracts without, a back and forth with the organization. So all good. It's been a really important call.
Yep.
Apologize for talking so much as usual.
No, Gordon, you got great input. All right. So, Mary, you've been sort of quiet. All seem reasonable.
All seems reasonable. Yes.
I didn't say doable, did I? I
Quiet.
said
No, you didn't.
reasonable.
And I did not say it was doable either. Quiet, but and taking notes because I think this was a really helpful call. And I appreciate that you all and especially the three of you recognize the need for support. So thank you. Um, it's been a long time coming, and so it feels good to know we'll make progress on that. And I'm excited to see the council more involved. You all are the subject matter experts, and I think now that we're starting to create a process, we can use your skills to our advantage in a way where before we weren't really sure how. So I'm looking forward to that. What I will do for Thursday is have a final draft of the coordinator position with updated responsibilities for the council to look at and approve. Um, from what I understand about the contracting process, my current contract ends on the 10th, so it ends Friday. And I don't know if we can get a fully new contract executed the day after it's signed. Um,
So
and so,
you need an extension.
so in order for me to work, I think we have to do a contract extension. I think we could do till the 30th of January, and then the 31st, the new contract would start. I'll work with Brendan on that, and hopefully have a draft of it ready. But I'll essentially need to sign that on Thursday, so that come Friday that can be processed by the AG's office.
So let me know if you need a vote on an extension of that
Yes, I will.
contract. And if I'm not mistaken, have we negotiated a salary with the executive director?
We have not. What I'll do is I'll reach out to Ben and talk to him a little bit about it,
Okay.
and then provide a sort of recommendation, or ask him to provide a recommendation to the council on
Okay.
Thursday. Yeah, and then we can get that new contract started by February 1st. I'll also try to get a draft, or at least a couple notes down on paper about that form. And I think that's a great idea. And if we
I
can
think it's
get
a
that
great
out to
idea.
grantees, yeah, to be able to just start that process. I mean, Grayson's already helped reach out for vendor forms and direct deposit, things that just take time and are hard to do. I mean, they're easy to do, but just we need to give ourselves 2 to 3 months. Um, so I'll get some ideas down, and that way I can get the council's input. So hopefully we can also get that form sent out sooner rather than later. With additional communications, I have a survey, and their evaluations and all of that. So there's an email that needs to go out to all of them with a chunk of information, and that will be really helpful to include.
Do you have any problem with including in that communication these standard terms and conditions?
I know, I have no problem. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And Grayson and Brendan have been working to look through those standard terms and highlight which ones have any room for negotiation, so that we can bring that back to the council, as these conversations unfold, to say, where the line is that we have to draw. I also met with licensing today, and
Yeah.
they're wonderful, to talk about Milestone's contract.
Was that Jen?
And that will be
Was
in,
that Jen,
Mhm.
Jen and Heather both?
Yes,
Yeah,
Heather had to
excellent.
drop off, but it was, yeah, and Jen and I meet tomorrow to finish going through that. But that was a helpful conversation, to understand one more step, that even if the council and AG don't require certain things, uh, especially in regards to our treatment programs and those we're funding, we'll have to, cross our T's and dot our I's with them.
Excellent. Well, I don't think we have to resolve which of the terms and conditions we can actually change when we send them with your form to the grantees. I mean, all we need to say is something like, these are the standard terms and conditions. We can sometimes, change some of them. Please let us know if you have, if any of them seem to be problematical with respect to your project and contract, something like that.
Mhm.
And we'll get a half a dozen comments, and I doubt that we get more than that. All right, I got to get to my
Mhm.
3 o'clock people
All right.
before they're done. This has been great. Really, I think we're making great progress. We really made a lot of headway the last month.
Well,
Thanks.
it's moving forward. So I thank you all for your time, and for doing this. And I will see you all Thursday.
I'll be there. Thanks.
See
Thank
you
you.
Thursday.
All right.
Bye
Bye.
now.
Thank you all. Thank you.